Jon Brion used to look through liner notes with a fear of seeing his name. Actually, the name was okay, it was the list of a dozen or more instruments that inevitably appeared next to his name that he began to dread. You remember the old Jerry's Deli menu, where it was like a loose leaf binder you got handed? He asks, invoking the venerable Studio City eatery to illustrate how he was identified on albums like Aimee Mann's Whatever, much of which he produced and on which he's credited as playing Deep Breath Here, Pump Organ, Mellotron, Chamberlin, Glockenspiel, Optigan, vibraphone, piano, harmonium. It was a zillion variations on the same thing. How do you want your pastrami or corned beef? And you're like, I'm here because I'm hungry and it's 3 AM. The problem was that all these exotic sounding devices were basically just different keyboards, as Brion puts it, and by mentioning each of them, the artists who hired him as a session musician, one of L.A.'s most in demand in the late 1990s and early 2000s, were stoking an idea that I don't believe in and certainly wasn't intending to put out there, which was this: Jon Brion is the man who can play anything. Today the characterization still makes him wince. But although he says he asked folks to streamline his contributions, Brion's legend only continued to grow thanks to his prolific studio work with the likes of Mann, Fiona Apple, Rufus Wainwright and Elliott Smith, and to his regular Friday night gig at Largo, which became a kind of clubhouse for L. By 1999, not long after he'd scored Paul Thomas Anderson's Oscar-nominated Magnolia, Brion had a deal with a major record label to release an album that was supposed to launch a solo career of his own. That's not what happened. Instead, the label rejected Brion's LP, titled Meaningless, telling him that his plaintive and witty songs had no prospects for radio play. Brion eventually started selling CDs through the internet. This was 2001, half a decade before Spotify's founding, and at Largo and Amoeba Music in Hollywood, where his assistant would drop off copies by hand. Yet those few in the know, including some of Brion's famous friends, came to view Meaningless as a lost classic. It was the holy grail, this unheralded work of genius that we other songwriters would measure each thing we did against, says Rhett Miller, the old 97's frontman who tapped Brion to. Our little tribe at Largo regarded it as the perfect album. Now, more than 2 decades later, Meaningless is widely available for the first time on streaming services and in a new vinyl reissue through Jealous Butcher Records, and just as Brion, 59, is slowly preparing to revive his beloved Largo residency after a years-long break due to the pandemic.